Latin nouns are divided into 5 distinct groups, called declensions, based on how these nouns end, and how these endings change according to their grammar. We group nouns into these declensions based on the ending of the genitive case. This video covers neuter nouns of the 4th declension. Yes, these nouns are different from the regular nouns of the 4th declension, which are predominantly masculine. We will be discussing words here like cornū and genu. Since we use the genitive case to determine to which declension a noun belongs, you will always see a noun listed with its nominative subject form, and this will be followed by its genitive form, the of form of the noun. 4th declension nouns, regardless of their gender, always end in a long us in their genitive singular, and this us will tell you that a noun is in the 4th declension. So therefore, 4th declension neuters must still end in an us in the genitive singular. It's some of the other endings that are slightly different. So before we get to the endings in declension, keep in mind the 2 specific rules about neuter nouns. Not just neuters in the 4th declension, but all neuters in all declensions. Rule number 1, the nominative and accusative are always identical. So for a 4th declension noun like genu, since our nominative is genu, the accusative is also genu. Rule number 2, the nominative and accusative plural always end in an a. Well, for 4th declension neuters, because the u dominates the 4th declension, the ending is actually a ua. So for our 4th declension word genu, the nominative and accusative plural is genua. So notice that rule number 2 doesn't violate rule number 1, and our plural nominative and accusative are still identical. So let's fill out the rest of our chart. The genitive is genus, but the ending for the other cases in the singular is just a long u, genu. The plural forms minus the genua in the nominative and accusative are identical to the masculine feminine 4th declension. In the genitive plural and ibus for the dative and ablative. So how common are these 4th declension neuters? Well, really, there are just 2 that you'll ever see with any frequency. Genu, which means knee, and cornū, which means horn. Okay, let me confess. So I teach this to 14 and 15-year-olds, and when I introduce the 4th declension neuter and bring up the fact that genu and cornū are really the only words in this declension in gender, I have to be very careful to put the knee, genu, before the horn, cornū. Because one time, I did it the other way around and gave the English translation of cornū and genu back to back, and so I lost the class to giggling. While they weren't thinking of goats, it's a relatively easy way to remember, though, these 2 words that you'll see in the 4th declension neuter. There are a few other words, though. So Alan and Greeno give weiru, which is a roasting spit, and sometimes pecu, which is a 4th declension form of the 3rd declension word pecus, which is a flock of animals like cattle. Often, pecus occurs in the 3rd declension, but every so often you'll find it migrating to the 4th declension neuter forms, especially in early Latin writers like Cato or Plautus. Other ancient grammarians give additional 4th declension neuters like tonitru, thunder, testu, and a lid used in cooking, and gelu, a chill or cold. But many of these words are more commonly found in the 2nd declension neuter like tonitrum, testum, and gelum. So how do you deal with the fact that most of the forms in the singular are identical? Well, like cornū, is that dative or accusative or ablative? Well, first it appears that the dative singular of cornū is never used, and then you'll just have to use context and sometimes adjectives. So in this sentence, the hoof deeply resounds with its dense horn. Cornū is ablative, as identified by the adjective solido, which is ablative too. And Caesar often uses it in the ablative case when referring to the wings of his army. A dextro cornu from the right flank, a sinistro cornu from the left flank. And whether it's the subject nominative or object accusative kind of sometimes depends on context, like with all neuters. So here, it's the accusative, because the subject of firmaverant is plural. They had strengthened the right and left flank with large forces of cavalry. So I'd be remiss to leave out one of the more common uses of cornu in antiquity, the cornucopiae, literally the horn of plenty, which has come down to us in the word cornucopia. This is the horn of the goat Amalthea, used to represent fertility, fruitfulness, and abundance, as here on this coin, where the two cornucopiae show the abundance created in Rome in the Golden Age under the rule of the Caesars.